The alarm at Sentinel Ridge Air Base split the morning silence like a blade. Captain Maya Rodriguez had been awake for 20 minutes already, sitting on the edge of her narrow bunk, lacing her boots with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. While other pilots stumbled from their quarters in various states of readiness, Maya was already walking toward the flight line, her helmet tucked under one arm. Bay 12 sat at the far end of the hangar row, separated from the others by 50 yards of empty tarmac. No ground crew waited there. No pre-flight banter echoed off the concrete walls. Maya's F-15 Silent Eagle stood alone, its matte black surface streaked with yesterday's dust that no one had bothered to clean. She didn't mind. She preferred it that way. "Morning, Rodriguez," called Staff Sergeant Johnson from Bay 7, where Captain Derek Thorne's jet gleamed under the floodlights. "You drew the spare frame again. Tough luck." Maya nodded without breaking stride. It wasn't luck, and they both knew it. The spare aircraft was assigned to pilots who didn't matter enough to rate a dedicated crew chief or polished fuselage. It was Bay 12's way of saying what everyone already understood. She was the fourth wheel in a three-pilot squadron. As she approached her aircraft, Maya caught fragments of conversation from the other bays. Thorne's voice carried over the engine. Noise, confident and loud. Double quotes, ... last ones, just filler anyway. "Keep her in trail, and we'll handle the real work." Captain Brad Silva laughed in response, while Captain Ryan Wyatt chimed in with something about spare parts and spare pilots. Maya pulled on her gloves patched. At the cuffs with red thread, she'd sewn herself and began her pre-flight inspection. She ran her hands along the wing surfaces, checking for stress fractures that maintenance might have missed. She verified the fuel seals, tested the control surfaces, and examined every rivet with the thoroughness of someone who knew her life depended on details others ignored. Her flight suit bore no custom stitching, no squadron patches beyond regulation. Requirements. Just her name stenciled in block letters. Rodriguez, M. The fabric showed wear at the knees and elbows, not from carelessness but from use. She'd been flying longer than any of them, though you wouldn't know it from the duty roster. The scramble order crackled over the base radio. 4 aircraft, intercept pattern, Vector 8. High priority. Unidentified contact moving fast near. Border, airspace. Maya climbed into her cockpit with the fluid motion of someone who belonged there, even if the rest of the world seemed to think otherwise. Her startup sequence was flawless. Every switch, every gauge, every system brought online with precision timing. She didn't rush because she didn't need to. She'd been ready since the moment her boots hit the floor. Through her canopy, she watched the other 3 pilots complete their preparations. Thorne sealed his cockpit first, his ground crew giving him a confident thumbs up. Silva and Wyatt followed, their aircraft surrounded by support personnel who waved them off like celebrities departing for a photo shoot. Maya's radio crackled. 4 live systems green, she reported, her voice steady and professional. There was a pause before the tower responded. Eclipse acknowledged. All assets cleared. Scramble approved. Vector 8 now hot. As the 4 F-15s taxied toward the active runway, Maya held her position at the rear of the formation. The spare pilot in the spare aircraft, flying the mission nobody thought mattered. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac, and Maya's Eagle rolled forward in perfect formation, 40 feet behind the others. She adjusted her flight card, a hand-annotated piece of paper clipped beside her throttle, and checked her pressure altimeter one final time. While the others focused on their instruments and their chatter, Maya looked up at the sky ahead. Something felt different about this morning. The air held a tension she couldn't name, a quality that made her check her weapon systems twice and verify her radar settings one more time than necessary. The others might see this as routine, but Maya had learned to trust her instincts. They'd kept her alive through more flights than she cared to count. As the runway centerline rushed beneath her aircraft and the silent eagle lifted into the crystalline morning air, Maya settled into the rhythm that had defined her career, flying alone, even in formation. Today, that might matter more than anyone realized. The sky stretched wide and empty ahead of them, but Maya knew better than to trust empty skies. In her experience, the most dangerous threats were the ones nobody else could see. At 36,000 feet, the world below looked like a topographical map spread across a briefing table. Captain Maya Rodriguez held her position in the diamond formation's trailing edge, her F-15 cutting through the thin air with mechanical precision. The radio chatter had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a routine intercept mission. Contact. Echo still drifting. Thorne's voice came through her headset, tight and professional. You see it shift to bearing 037? Silver responded before Maya could key in. Negative. Looks stable. Probably just scatter off the hills. Wyatt's laugh crackled through the static. Probably another weather drone. These things scramble us. Overshadows if you let them. Maya said nothing. She was busy studying her left multifunction display, narrowing the cone of her passive infrared search system. The image that returned was fuzzy at first, too soft to read properly, but there it was. The echo that had triggered their scramble. It wasn't behaving like a weather drone. The signature drifted, not fast or erratic, but just off the margin of expected deviation. A half beat behind where atmospheric conditions suggested it should be. Maya had seen enough radar ghosts to know the difference between electronic noise and something real trying not to be seen. She rotated her radar cone. 5 degrees off-axis. Not enough to trigger a system alert, but sufficient to get a cleaner look. Her HUD stayed quiet, but she saw the drift pattern double back on itself. 1 second, the echo dragged left. The next it dropped low enough to lose lock, then returned to exactly where it had been before. Maya keyed her microphone. Eclipse 4. To lead. Echo not tracking true. Recommend vector adjustment for second confirmation. The pause that followed lasted 3 heartbeats too long. Copy that, 4, Thorne replied, his voice carrying the patient tone reserved for explaining things to children. But your trace is likely sensor lag. We're seeing clean signatures on 3 aircraft. Continue intercept heading. Wyatt added his own assessment. Probably clipped a rock outcrop on the pass. Happens all the time up here. Silva's voice carried an edge of condescension. Echo's cold, Rodriguez. It's a sleeper contact. No need to chase ghosts. Maya didn't argue. She'd learned years ago that pushing back on radio only marked you as difficult, and she couldn't afford that reputation. Instead, she toggled to manual gain and adjusted her sensor blend herself. The others were using system defaults, letting the computer decide what was worth seeing. Maya preferred to see everything and make her own judgments. Her HUD flickered. Once, then leveled out. She had stripped away most of the visual overlays that other pilots preferred. No altitude tapes, no waypoint markers, no threat rings cluttering her view. Just raw numbers, elevation, bearing, and velocity vector on the center screen. The others flew by computer assistance. Maya flew by feel, augmented by technology rather than dependent on it. The contact shifted again, and this time Maya was ready for it. The echo moved with purpose, not randomly, but following a pattern that suggested intelligence. It wasn't searching the sky like a lost aircraft would. It was watching them, learning their formation spacing and flight characteristics. She slowed her throttle by 3%, just enough to fall back from the diamond formation without triggering formation alerts. Her engine adjustments were so smooth that her aircraft's motion looked like natural air current correction. The others wouldn't notice unless they were specifically watching for it. Maya ran the intercept calculations in her head, cross-referencing with the notes she'd made on her flight card the night before. The red question mark she'd drawn in the margin of her personal intercept probability chart now seemed prophetic. The pattern she was seeing matched her theoretical worst-case scenario almost perfectly. All aircraft, prepare for standard intercept. Approach, Thorne announced. Signal point now bearing 040 at 2,000 meters. Standard engagement protocols. Maya tapped her data feed and refreshed the thermal outline. The heat signature showed a bloom just slightly higher than surface ambient temperature. Not enough to spike the automatic threat detection systems, but sufficient to suggest active propulsion. A dead weather drone wouldn't show thermal activity. She keyed her microphone again. Forward to lead. Contact showing reactive drift patterns. Recommend altitude split to confirm intentions. Wyatt's response came immediately. It's a weather phantom, Rodriguez. Come back to formation. Silva's voice carried barely concealed irritation. We're cleared to intercept, not dance around the sky. Stay in position. Maya fell silent but didn't comply. She shifted her heading by 4 degrees and dropped 50 feet in altitude. The move registered as a minor course correction, not a formation break. Her screen cleared as the angle changed, and suddenly she could see what the others were missing. The contact wasn't just drifting, it was mirroring their movements. When Thorne adjusted course, the echo shifted to match. When Silva increased throttle to close distance, the contact accelerated proportionally. It was studying them, learning their response patterns and flight characteristics in real time. Maya's pulse remained steady, but every instinct she'd developed over 15 years of flying screamed that this was not a routine intercept. The others saw what their computers told them to see. Maya saw what was actually there, an intelligence that was very much awake and very much watching them approach. She adjusted her trim tabs by feel and steadied her aircraft on a heading that would keep her just outside the formation's radar shadow. The others could fly their textbook intercept. Maya would be ready for whatever they were really flying into. The sky had turned that particular shade of pale blue that comes just before weather system shift. Captain Maya Rodriguez felt the change in her aircraft's handling, subtle air density variations that most pilots never noticed, but that her hands read through the control stick like braille. Her F-15 held position 200 meters behind the main. Formation, close enough to maintain communication, but far enough back to see the bigger picture. What she saw made her stomach tighten with recognition. The unidentified contact had stopped drifting randomly. Now it moved with deliberate precision, matching their altitude changes and course corrections with mechanical accuracy. It wasn't lost or confused, it was practicing. Maya watched the thermal signature pulse on her display, a rhythmic pattern that suggested active scanning systems. Whatever was out there was taking detailed measurements of their aircraft, learning their capabilities and limitations. The realization hit her like ice water. They weren't intercepting a wayward drone. They were being studied. Eclipse lead, this is 4. She transmitted, keeping her voice level. Contact is exhibiting adaptive behavior patterns. Recommend we treat this as potentially hostile reconnaissance. The silence that followed lasted long enough for Maya to wonder if her radio had failed. Then Thorne's voice came back, sharp with irritation. 4. Your sensor reading is inconsistent with our data. The contact shows no active emissions and maintains steady heading. Return to formation immediately. Silva's voice cut in. Rodriguez, you're seeing things that aren't there. It's weather scatter, just like we said. Wyatt added his voice to the chorus. Come on, Maya. Don't turn a routine patrol into some kind of thriller movie. It's just atmospheric interference. Maya felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the same tone she'd heard in briefing rooms and ready rooms for years. The tone that said her input wasn't valued. Her experience didn't matter. Her instincts were somehow less reliable than everyone else's. But this time, lives might depend on what she saw. She adjusted her radar game manually, fine-tuning the sensitivity beyond what the automatic systems would attempt. The contact sharpened on her display, revealing details that made her blood run cold. The object wasn't just flying. It was maneuvering with the fluid precision of something designed for combat. Lead 4 has clear visual contact, Maya transmitted. Object shows active flight control surfaces and powered maneuvering capability. This is not a weather phenomenon. Rodriguez, enough. Thorne's voice carried command authority now. You will return to assigned position and maintain formation discipline. That's an order. Maya felt the weight of 15 years in the Air Force pressing down on her. 15 years of being the outsider, the one who asked inconvenient questions, the pilot who saw problems others preferred to ignore. She could comply with the order, fall back into line, and hope the others were right about the harmless weather drone. Or she could trust her instincts and face the consequences. The contact shifted again, and this time Maya saw something that made her decision final. The object rolled slightly, exposing its underside for just a moment. In that brief glimpse, she saw what no weather drone should have: hardpoints, weapons mounting stations. Maya's hands moved without conscious thought. She rolled her F-15 into a shallow dive, dropping below the formation's altitude while maintaining her forward position. Her aircraft responded like an extension of her body, the controls smooth and precise under her touch. 4. What are you doing? Silva's voice carried sharp concern. Maintaining visual contact, Maya replied calmly. Someone needs to see what we're really dealing with. Her radar warning receiver remained silent. The contact wasn't actively targeting them yet. But Maya could see it clearly now, flying parallel to their course about 500 meters to the east. It was sleek, angular, definitely not American design. The stealth shaping was sophisticated, advanced enough to fool standard intercept radars. 4. Return to formation now. Thorne's voice carried the full weight of command authority. You are not authorized for independent action. Maya knew she was crossing a line that would probably end her career. But as she watched the unknown aircraft pace their formation with predatory patience, she realized her career might be ending anyway if she didn't act. The contact was studying them, learning their capabilities and response patterns. Every minute they flew in formation was another minute of intelligence being gathered by an aircraft that had no business being in their airspace. Maya adjusted her throttle and began to close the distance. Whatever happened next, she would be ready for it. The others could fly their textbook intercept and file their routine reports. She would fly the mission that actually mattered. Captain. Maya Rodriguez's F-15 sliced through the thin air at 35,000 feet, now completely separated from the formation she was supposed to be following. Her radio crackled with increasingly urgent transmissions from the other pilots, but she had reduced the volume to background noise. Every instinct told her that what happened in the next few minutes would determine whether they all made it home. The unidentified aircraft had noticed her approach. Maya could see it clearly now through her HUD, sleek, angular, with the kind of advanced stealth shaping that spoke of serious military investment. Not a weather drone, not atmospheric interference, but a sophisticated reconnaissance platform gathering intelligence on American intercept capabilities. Maya rolled her aircraft into a gentle pursuit curve, matching the unknown contact's altitude and heading while staying just outside what she estimated to be its sensor envelope. Her hands worked the controls with the fluid precision that came from thousands of hours in the cockpit, making minute adjustments that kept her aircraft on the edge of detection. Eclipse 4, you are ordered to return to formation immediately. Captain Thorne's voice cut through her headset with command authority. You are operating outside mission parameters. Maya keyed her microphone once, not to speak but to acknowledge. Transmission, then switched to a backup frequency. If she was going to do this, she needed to do it without distraction. The contact began a slow turn to the northeast, and Maya's blood ran cold as she realized what she was seeing. The aircraft wasn't just gathering intelligence. It was positioning itself for an attack run on the formation. The turn would put it on an intercept course with the other 3 F-15s, approaching from their blind spot while they continued their textbook intercept of empty sky. Maya's mind raced through the tactical situation. The unknown aircraft had stealth capabilities that were defeating the other pilots' radar systems, and had been pacing them for at least 10 minutes, learning their formation patterns and reaction times. Now it was moving into an attack position, while her squadron mates remained blissfully unaware of the threat. She had perhaps 30 seconds to prevent a potential disaster. Maya pushed her throttles forward, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as her F-15's twin engines responded. The silent eagle leaped forward like a predator finally released from its leash. She climbed slightly, positioning herself between the unknown aircraft and her squadron. Her radar warning receiver remained silent. The contact still wasn't actively targeting anyone. But Maya could see the attack geometry developing. The unknown aircraft was maneuvering to put the sun behind it while approaching the formation from below, a classic fighter pilot's tactic for achieving surprise. Unidentified aircraft. This is United States Air Force Eclipse 4. Maya transmitted on guard frequency. You are ordered to alter course immediately and identify yourself. The response was silence. Maya close to within 300 meters, near enough to see details of the aircraft's construction. It was definitely foreign design, possibly Russian or Chinese, with sophisticated stealth modifications that explained how it had remained undetected for so long. More importantly, she could now see the telltale signs of weapon systems internal, bay doors and what looked like advanced air-to-air missiles. Her radio exploded with traffic as the other pilots finally began to understand what was happening. 4. What's your position? Silva's voice carried new urgency. Contact! Contact! Wyatt shouted. I'm getting active radar paint from unknown. Source: all aircraft. Defensive formation. Thorne commanded. 4. Report your status. Maya smiled grimly as she watched the unknown aircraft's careful approach degrade into hasty maneuvering. Her presence had disrupted its attack sequence, forcing it to react instead of executing its planned surprise assault. The hunter had become the hunted, but now came the dangerous part. The unknown aircraft was still armed, still capable, and now it knew it had been detected. Maya had perhaps prevented an ambush, but she had also escalated the situation into active combat. She armed her weapon systems and prepared for the fight of her life. Behind her, she could hear the other pilots finally taking the threat seriously, their voices tight with combat tension as they maneuvered into defensive positions. Maya had spent 15 years being ignored, dismissed, and sidelined. But today, her willingness to break formation and trust her instincts had just saved her squadron from walking into an ambush. Now she had to keep them all alive long enough to get home. The sky became a three-dimensional chessboard as Captain Maya Rodriguez maneuvered her F-15 into a deadly dance with the unknown aircraft. At 400 meters separation, she could see every detail of her opponent, the advanced stealth coating, the predatory lines of its airframe, and most importantly, the slight adjustments it made as it tried to regain tactical advantage. Maya's radio crackled with urgent transmissions as the other pilots finally grasped the situation. Eclipse lead has radar contact. Thorne's voice carried new respect. Unknown aircraft bearing 045, Angels 35. 4. How long have you been tracking this contact? Since intercept initiation, Maya replied calmly, never taking her eyes off the threat. Contact has been shadowing formation for approximately 12 minutes. The unknown aircraft rolled hard left, trying to put distance between itself and Maya's pursuing F-15. Maya anticipated the move, cutting inside the turn with the kind of aggressive maneuvering that separated experienced combat pilots from weekend warriors. Her aircraft groaned under the G-forces, but she held the intercept angle. How did you see it when we couldn't? Silva's voice carried a mix of admiration and bewilderment. Manual radar sweep, passive infrared, visual confirmation, Maya replied. Through gritted teeth as she pulled 4 Gs in a climbing turn. It was there all along. You just had to know how to look. The unknown aircraft suddenly decelerated, a dangerous move that Maya recognized as preparation for a defensive missile. Shot. She yanked her stick hard right and dove, clearing the potential firing solution while maintaining visual contact. Her aircraft screamed through the thin air, every rivet and bolt stressed to its design limits. Fox 2, Fox 2. Wyatt's voice echoed through the radio as he launched a heat-seeking missile at maximum range. Maya watched the contrail streak across the sky, knowing it would miss. The unknown aircraft stealth systems were too sophisticated for a conventional sidewinder shot at this distance. Sure enough, the missile lost lock and detonated harmlessly in empty air. But it had the desired effect. The unknown aircraft pilot now knew he was facing 4 armed F-15s instead of 3 unsuspecting targets. Maya saw her opportunity as the contact maneuvered to avoid Wyatt's missile. She rolled inverted and pulled hard, bringing her nose around to a firing position. The unknown aircraft filled her HUD, close enough that she could see the pilot's helmet through the canopy. Eclipse 4 has tone, Maya announced as her missile seeker locked onto the target. Firing. Her IM-12OM Ream missile dropped cleanly from her internal weapons bay and streaked toward the target with deadly precision. The unknown aircraft pilot reacted instantly, deploying chaff and flares while pulling into a vertical climb that would have blacked out most pilots. Maya followed, her vision graying at the edges as the G-forces built. But her missile stayed locked, its active radar seeker immune to the electronic countermeasures that might have confused an older weapon system. The unknown aircraft pilot made his final mistake. He tried to outclimb Maya's missile instead of outturning it. The AMRAAM detonated 10 meters from the target, its expanding rod warhead shredding the aircraft's left wing and engine. Maya watched the unknown aircraft enter an uncontrollable spin, black smoke trailing from its damaged engine. The pilot ejected just before the aircraft broke apart, his parachute deploying cleanly in the thin air. Splash 1 Bandit, Maya announced, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Pilot safely ejected. I'm moving to cap the area. The radio fell silent for a moment as the implications sank in. They had just shot down an unidentified military aircraft in what was supposed to be a routine training exercise. The diplomatic and military ramifications would be enormous. Thorne's voice came through first, professional and controlled. Outstanding work, 4. You just prevented what could have been a catastrophic ambush. Silva added his voice. Maya, I owe you an apology. And probably my life. Wyatt's transmission was simpler. Hell of a job, Rodriguez. Hell of a job. Maya circled the area where the enemy pilot had landed, her eyes already scanning for potential search and rescue threats. The immediate danger was over, but her work wasn't finished. She had turned what could have been a disaster into a victory, but now came the harder task of dealing with the consequences. As she watched the smoke trail from the destroyed aircraft dissipate in the thin air, Maya reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment. Years of being dismissed, ignored, and sidelined had taught her to trust her own judgment. Above all else, today, that independence had saved her squadron. The unknown aircraft had been equipped with advanced stealth technology and sophisticated weapon systems. It had been gathering intelligence on American intercept procedures, learning their capabilities and limitations for some future confrontation. Maya's willingness to break formation and investigate had prevented that intelligence from being delivered to whoever had sent the aircraft. But more than that, her actions had finally proven what she had always known, that being the outsider, the one who questioned assumptions and saw what others missed, wasn't a weakness. It was her greatest strength. The debrief room at Sentinel Ridge Air Base felt different when Captain Maya Rodriguez walked in 3 hours after landing. Usually, she found herself assigned to the back corner, her input an afterthought to be collected after the real pilots had finished their analysis. Today, she was directed to the chair at the head of the conference table. Colonel James Harrison, the wing commander, studied her with the intense gaze of someone recalibrating long-held assumptions. Around the table sat Captains Thorne, Silva, and Wyatt, along with intelligence officers, flight surgeons, and 2 men in civilian clothes who hadn't bothered to introduce themselves. Captain Rodriguez, Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of command. Your actions today require explanation. You broke formation without authorization, engaged an unidentified aircraft without clearance, and destroyed what appears to be a foreign military reconnaissance platform. Maya kept her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. Yes, sir. I believe my actions prevented a potential attack on Eclipse formation and preserved operational security. One of the civilian analysts leaned forward. Captain, our preliminary examination of the debris suggests this was a highly sophisticated stealth aircraft, possibly Chinese J-20 derivative or Russian Su-57 variant. How were you able to detect it when our standard intercept radars showed nothing? Maya had been expecting this question. I maintained passive infrared scan throughout the mission and noticed the contact's behavior didn't match atmospheric phenomena. It was maintaining position relative to our formation and mimicking our course changes. Thorne shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Maya Captain Rodriguez saw patterns that our systems missed. When she tried to report it, He paused, looking down at his hands. We dismissed her observations. Colonel Harrison's expression hardened. Are you telling me that Captain Rodriguez identified a legitimate threat that 3 experienced pilots and their electronic systems failed to detect? Silva spoke up, his voice quiet. Yes, sir. She tried to warn us multiple times. We told her. She was chasing ghosts. The intelligence officer made notes on his tablet. Captain Rodriguez, your service record indicates you've consistently scored at the top of your class in threat recognition and defensive tactics. Yet you've remained in junior assignments while other pilots have advanced. Can you explain this discrepancy? Maya chose her words carefully. I believe my tendency to question standard procedures and protocols has been viewed as problematic by some commanders. Problematic how? Colonel Harrison's voice carried an edge. I've been characterized as difficult to work with, overly cautious, and prone to seeing threats where none exist. Maya met the colonel's gaze directly. Today suggests those characterizations may have been inaccurate. Wyatt cleared his throat. Sir, if I may. Captain Rodriguez has been flying as our formation spare for 3 years. She's never had a dedicated crew chief, never been considered for advanced training, never been included in planning sessions. We treated her like she was just along for the ride. And why was that? The civilian analyst asked. Thorne answered reluctantly, because she didn't fit in. She questioned our methods, suggested alternative approaches, pointed out potential problems with our tactics. It was easier to sideline her than to listen. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Maya could see the recognition dawning on faces around the table. They had systematically excluded the one pilot, whose skills and instincts might have prevented today's crisis from happening at all. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair. So let me understand this correctly. We have been flying intercept missions for months, possibly years, with compromised security because we ignored the one pilot who was capable of detecting advanced stealth threats. It appears that way, sir, Maya replied quietly. The intelligence officer looked up from his tablet. Captain, we've recovered the enemy pilot. He's been conducting reconnaissance missions over this area for approximately 6 months, gathering detailed intelligence on our response patterns and capabilities. Your actions today prevented the completion of what was likely his final intelligence-gathering mission. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. 6 months of preparation, 6 months of studying American intercept procedures, building toward what would have been a devastating surprise attack on her squadron. The systematic nature of it was terrifying. Colonel Harrison stood up, his expression grim. Captain Rodriguez, you are hereby relieved of spare pilot duties effective immediately. Maya's heart sank until he continued. You will be assigned as Eclipse Squadron's new tactical leader, responsible for threat assessment and advanced intercept procedures. The promotion hit Maya like a physical blow. After 15 years of being sidelined, dismissed, and ignored, she was suddenly being placed in a position of real authority. Furthermore, the colonel continued, you will be leading a comprehensive review of our intercept protocols. It appears our standard procedures are inadequate for modern stealth threats. Thorne spoke up. Sir, I want to formally recommend Captain Rodriguez for the Distinguished Flying Cross. Her actions today saved American lives and prevented a significant intelligence breach. Silva and Wyatt nodded in agreement. Around the table, the mood had shifted completely. The woman they had dismissed as problematic was now recognized as the one person who had been right all along. Maya felt the weight of vindication settle over her shoulders. It wasn't just about the promotion or the recognition. It was about finally being seen for who she really was instead of who others assumed her to be. 2 weeks after the intercept mission that changed everything, Captain Maya Rodriguez stood in the same briefing room where she had once been an afterthought. Now, she commanded the attention of every pilot in Eclipse Squadron as she outlined new threat assessment procedures. The enemy aircraft we encountered was not an isolated incident. Maya explained, pointing to satellite imagery displayed on the main screen. Intelligence has identified at least 12 similar reconnaissance missions over the past 8 months, all following patterns designed to exploit weaknesses in our standard intercept protocols. Captain Thorne raised his hand. Maya, how do we adjust our procedures to detect these advanced stealth platforms? The question carried none of the condescension Maya had grown accustomed to over the years. Instead, Thorne's voice held genuine respect and a desire to learn from someone he now recognized as an expert. We integrate passive sensors with active radar, maintain irregular formation patterns, and most importantly, we trust our instincts when something feels wrong. Maya clicked to the next slide. The enemy was counting on our predictability. They studied our textbook responses and planned accordingly. Captain Silva leaned forward in his chair. So by breaking formation when you did, you disrupted their entire operational plan. Exactly. The reconnaissance aircraft was positioned to observe our standard intercept approach and defensive maneuvers. When I deviated from expected behavior, it forced them to improvise. Maya paused, letting the lesson sink in. Predictability is vulnerability in modern aerial combat. Colonel Harrison entered the briefing room, followed by the same civilian intelligence officer who had attended Maya's debrief. The wing commander's expression was serious, but not grim, the look of someone dealing with significant developments. Captain Rodriguez, we've received additional intelligence about the aircraft you engaged. Colonel Harrison gestured to the analyst, who stepped forward with a classified folder. The pilot we captured has been cooperative, the analyst began. He confirms that your intercept disrupted a major intelligence operation. His aircraft was equipped with advanced electronic surveillance equipment designed to catalog our defensive capabilities for a larger operation planned for next month. Maya felt her stomach drop. A larger operation, sir? Colonel Harrison nodded grimly. A coordinated probe involving multiple stealth aircraft, designed to test our air defense network across the entire western seaboard. Your actions didn't just prevent one intelligence-gathering mission. You likely prevented a strategic surprise attack. The briefing room fell silent as the pilots absorbed this information. Maya realized that her decision to break formation had consequences far beyond what she had imagined. She hadn't just saved her squadron. She had potentially prevented a military disaster of enormous proportions. Captain Rodriguez, Colonel Harrison continued, you're being reassigned to Pentagon Tactical Development. The Air Force wants you to lead a team designing new intercept procedures for stealth threats. Maya stared at the colonel, hardly believing what she was hearing. 3 weeks ago, she had been the spare pilot nobody listened to. Now she was being offered a position at the highest levels of military planning. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'd like to remain with Eclipse Squadron if possible. These pilots need retraining on advanced threat recognition, and I believe I can be most effective here. Thorne looked surprised. Maya, this is the Pentagon. It's the assignment of a lifetime. Maya shook her head. My job isn't finished here. We've identified the problem, but we haven't solved it. Every squadron in the Air Force is potentially vulnerable to the same kind of attack we faced. The solution isn't better procedures from Washington. It's better training for pilots in the field. Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment. You're turning down a promotion to stay with a squadron that spent 3 years ignoring you. Yes, sir, because now they're listening. The colonel smiled, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him. Very well, Captain. You'll remain with Eclipse Squadron as tactical leader, but with additional responsibilities. You'll be developing training protocols for every intercept squadron in the Air Force. Maya nodded, accepting the expanded role. She looked around the briefing room at the faces of pilots who had once dismissed her as difficult and problematic. Now they watched her with respect, waiting for her guidance on how to face threats they had never imagined. Captain Wyatt spoke, up from the back of the room. Maya, I have to ask, how did you know to break formation when you did? What made you so certain? Maya considered the question carefully. I've spent 15 years being told I was wrong when I knew I was right. I've learned to trust my instincts over other people's assumptions. When every system said the contact was benign, but my gut said it was dangerous, I chose to trust myself. She paused, looking directly at each pilot in turn. The enemy was counting on us to follow standard procedures, to trust our computers, over our judgment, to dismiss anomalies as sensor errors. They were right about our predictability, but they underestimated our ability to adapt. Colonel Harrison closed his folder and stood to leave. Captain Rodriguez, your new protocols will be implemented across the Air Force within 60 days. The Joint Chiefs want this training program operational before any other surprises appear in our airspace. As the briefing broke up, Maya found herself surrounded by pilots who wanted to understand her methods, learn her techniques, and prepare for threats they now realized existed. For the first time in her career, being different was seen as an asset rather than a liability. Maya had spent years proving she belonged in the cockpit. Now she would spend her time teaching others how to see what she had always seen, the dangers hiding in plain sight, the threats that computers missed, the patterns that revealed hostile intent. The quiet pilot from Bay 12 had found her voice. And the Air Force was finally ready to listen. 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Captain Maya Rodriguez stood at the podium of the Air Force Academy's Falcon Stadium, looking out at an audience of 4,000 cadets, officers, and distinguished guests. The Distinguished Flying Cross hung heavy on her chest, its weight a tangible reminder of how far she had traveled from the lonely pilot in Bay 12, the most dangerous enemy. Maya said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly across the stadium, is not the one you can see coming. It's the one that hides in your assumptions, in your routines, in your unwillingness to question what everyone else accepts as truth. In the front row sat Colonel Harrison, now promoted to brigadier general, and beside him, the 3 pilots who had once dismissed her observations as the fantasies of an overly cautious spare. Captain Thorne had been promoted to squadron commander. Silva and Wyatt now led advanced training programs based on Maya's protocols. All 3 had become advocates for the woman they had once marginalized. Maya continued her address to the cadets. 6 months ago, I was the pilot nobody listened to. I flew missions where my input was considered unnecessary. My observations were dismissed as paranoid, and my presence was tolerated rather than valued. She paused, letting her words sink in. I was the spare pilot in every sense of the word. A cadet in the 3rd row raised her hand. Mom, how did you maintain confidence in your abilities when everyone around you suggested you were wrong? Maya smiled, recognizing something of herself in the young woman's earnest expression. I didn't maintain confidence. There were nights I wondered if they were right, if I was seeing threats that didn't exist, if my instincts were simply wrong. She gripped the podium edge. But I never stopped trusting what I could see with my own eyes, what I could feel through the controls of my aircraft. Behind the cadets, Maya spotted a familiar figure in the audience. Master Sergeant Johnson, her former crew chief from Bay 12, gave her a thumbs up. He now ran the maintenance program for her new squadron, where every aircraft received the same meticulous attention regardless of which pilot flew it. The enemy aircraft I engaged was part of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been observing our procedures for 8 months, Maya explained. They knew exactly how we would respond to their presence, because we had become predictable. They counted on our adherence to standard operating procedures, our trust in automated systems, and our reluctance to deviate from established patterns. Another cadet called out, "What changed when you broke formation?" "Everything." Maya's voice carried the weight of experience. The moment I stopped following their script, their entire plan fell apart. They had prepared for pilots who would follow protocol, who would trust their computers over their instincts, who would dismiss anomalies as sensor errors. General Harrison stood up from his seat and approached the podium. Maya stepped aside as he took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general announced, "I want you to understand what Captain Rodriguez accomplished. The intelligence operation she disrupted was the final phase of reconnaissance for a planned attack on 12 Air Force bases across the western United States. Her actions prevented what could have been the most devastating surprise attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor." The stadium erupted in applause. Maya felt her cheeks flush as 4,000 people rose to their feet in recognition of her service. For a woman who had spent her career in the shadows, the attention was overwhelming. When the applause died down, Maya retook the microphone. "The lesson here isn't about me," she said firmly. "It's about the danger of dismissing voices that don't fit comfortable assumptions. Every organization has people like I, with individuals who see problems others miss, who ask uncomfortable questions, who challenge established wisdom." She looked directly at the cadets in the front rows. "Your job as future officers is not just to lead, but to listen. The person who seems difficult, who asks too many questions, who refuses to accept simple answers. The person might be the one who saves your life someday. A senior cadet stood up. Ma'am, what's your advice for those of us who feel like outsiders? Maya considered the question carefully. Trust yourself, but verify everything. Question assumptions, but offer alternatives. And remember that being different isn't a weakness. It's often the perspective that sees what everyone else misses. After the ceremony, Maya walked across the academy grounds with General Harrison. The Colorado mountains rose sharp and clear. Against the blue sky, their peaks touched with early snow. Maya, the general said, I owe you an apology. Not just for the events 6 months ago, but for every time over the years when your insights were dismissed. Your concerns were minimized. Your contributions were overlooked. Maya shook her head. Sir, you weren't even my commander for most of that time. No, but I was part of a system that failed to recognize your value. We promoted the pilots who fit in, who didn't cause problems, who followed orders without question. We sidelined the ones who thought differently, who saw problems we didn't want to acknowledge. They paused at the edge of the parade ground, where cadets were practicing drill formations in the afternoon sun. The irony, General Harrison continued, is that the qualities that made you seem difficult, your independence, your willingness to question authority, your refusal to accept easy answers, those were exactly the qualities we needed most. Maya watched the cadets march in perfect synchronization. Maybe that's the real lesson, sir. Sometimes the person who doesn't fit the formation is the one who sees the bigger picture. 3 weeks later, Maya received orders for her next assignment. Commanding Officer, 27th Fighter Squadron, Langley Air Force Base. The position came with promotion to Major and responsibility for 24 F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighters in the world. On her final day at Sentinel Ridge, Maya walked one last time to Bay 12. Her old F-15 Silent Eagle sat there, now assigned to a young lieutenant who reminded Maya of herself at that age. The aircraft gleamed under the hangar lights, every surface polished to perfection by a crew chief who understood that every pilot deserved the best. Maya ran her hand along the wing where she had once made her pre-flight inspections alone, ignored by the maintenance teams who focused their attention on more important pilots. The metal felt warm under her palm, solid and dependable. Colonel Thorne approached from behind, carrying a small wrapped package. Maya, the squadron wanted you to have this. Inside the package was a patch, the Eclipse Squadron emblem with a modification. Below the traditional eagle design was a single line of text. Trust your instincts. It's the new squadron motto, Thorne explained. We voted unanimously. It seemed appropriate. Maya pinned the patch to her flight jacket, next to the ribbons and decorations that told the story of her career. The Distinguished Flying Cross caught the light, but it was the simple squadron patch that meant the most. As she drove away from Sentinel Ridge for the last time, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from the margins to command. She had learned that strength didn't always come from fitting in, that value wasn't always recognized immediately, and that sometimes the most important victories were the ones nobody else understood. The road ahead led to new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to make a difference. But Maya carried with her the knowledge that she had earned her place through competence, courage, and an unwillingness to compromise her principles. In the rearview mirror, she watched the base disappear behind a line of trees. Somewhere in the sky above, pilots were flying patrol missions with new procedures, enhanced awareness, and a deeper understanding of the threats they faced. Maya Rodriguez had spent 15 years being the spare pilot, the outsider, the voice in the wilderness. Now she was the commander, the leader, the officer who would shape the next generation of fighters. The quiet eagle had found her wings. Epilogue. 1 year later, The Rodriguez Protocol for Advanced Threat Recognition became standard training for all U.S. fighter pilots. Enemy reconnaissance missions over American airspace dropped to zero. The woman who had once flown alone in formation now led the most elite fighter squadron in the Air Force. Maya's story spread through military circles as an example of how unconventional thinking and unwavering principles could overcome systemic bias and institutional blindness. She became a symbol for every service member who had ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed. But Maya never forgot the lessons of Bay 12. In her new command, she made sure that every voice was heard, every concern was investigated, and every pilot, no matter how different they might seem, was given the opportunity to prove their worth. The spare pilot had become the standard by which all others were measured. And in doing so, she had made the skies safer for everyone who followed in her contrails. Sometimes the person who doesn't fit in is exactly the person you need most. Maya Rodriguez proved that truth in the most dangerous way possible by being right when everyone else was wrong, and by having the courage to act on her convictions even when it meant flying alone. Her legacy wasn't just the lives she saved or the protocols she developed. It was the understanding that strength comes in many forms, that wisdom doesn't always speak with the loudest voice, and that sometimes the most important mission is simply refusing to be ignored. The sky remembers every pilot who has flown through it, but it especially remembers the ones who changed its rules. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever been in a situation where you saw something others missed, or where your different perspective made all the difference? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else who feels overlooked or undervalued. Remember, sometimes the person who doesn't fit in is exactly the person the world needs most. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next story.